Welcome, everyone. We're excited to have you here with us today. My name is the Reverend Suzanne Parker Miller, and I'm the director and founder of Pastors for North Carolina Children. We are coming to you today to present a Zoom conversation about how to spot a pro-public education candidate, how to cut through some of the rhetoric and some of the jargon and be able to see where folks actually stand. And so I want to introduce my co-host today, Susan Book. She's not an unfamiliar person to many of you. Susan has been working in advocacy for a long time. And Susan?
Hi, everyone. So this presentation came out of, an ask actually, because a lot of our school boards, for example, are still nonpartisan. And so somebody was like, well, how do I decode all this? And so when I was working with Save Our Schools, we thought, well, what a great idea to try to help people decode what what are our politicians talking about when they talk about being an elected official in the pro-education space? And look, we are definitely going to come about this nonpartisan, but we definitely take the worldview that public school is a public good, and as an issue-based organization, that we are going to be looking for elected officials that share our values and our issues. So we are going to specifically looking for those candidates who are going to support public education. And education is always going to be political because we are dealing with politicians and elected officials, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's partisan. And so that's how we're going to approach this subject as best as we can.
Yes,
All
and I want to
right.
say Susan is the founder of Save Our Schools North Carolina and also the Advocacy Bites podcast. And we will have all of those links and information for you at the end. We will also be taking questions at the end and providing responses and answers as we can. So if you have questions, hold those until we get to that spot. If so, if you can. And last but not least, since we are recording, if you would keep your video, you can keep your video on or off. That's up to you. But do be sure to keep yourself on mute until we get to that question and answer part. So thank you so much. Susan, go ahead.
Okay. So, red light, green light, what in the world does that mean? Well, we actually, during this presentation, are going to look at some of our school candidates who have websites, and we're going to kind of like say, are they a red light? Are they a green light? All right. When do we stop and look for more? And when are we like, whoa, we know who we're voting for? This is just who we are. And I am proud to be part of now the Pastors for North Carolina Children team officially, coming to you live from Edenton Street Methodist Church. Okay, first things first. I want you all to get very cozy with your ballot. Print it out before, well, now. Print it out now. Go and look yourself up. Make sure you're registered to vote. We'll have that link at the end of this presentation. And on there is a sample ballot. Hit that. If you've got a printer, print it out. Live with that thing. That is your new best friend. And you can look at all of the elected officials on that ballot. Many of them do touch education, not all, but I want you to take close attention to our governor, our lieutenant governor, our House and State Senate. These are crucial, absolute crucial to how we fund our schools. The North Carolina General Assembly is the primary funder of our public schools in North Carolina. So who we vote for then makes a big difference. Judges, something that when I started, if you had asked me if I was going to be standing out in front of a Supreme Court talking about education issues when I started, I would have thought you all had lost your minds. But I've been out there more than once in front of our courts talking about public education, because our education policy goes through the courts often now, whether it's the Court of Appeals, whether it's our state Supreme Court, because education is a state issue, and that's where it's going to primarily live. And pay attention to things like district court too, though, because juvenile justice lives in district court. And so we should really be mindful of how a district court judge might think about either education or children and what are the proper consequences for children. So these are things to be aware of when you're just looking at that sample ballot. And now you've got names, and now you've got research. And though some may be unopposed, I've got several on my ballot. I'm just going to ask you to really take a moment and look at your sample ballot and research those names and find out for yourself where they stand. Yeah, next one. Okay. Foundational qualifications. Whoops. Knowledge of office is really important to me. Do they know what they're running for and what the powers of that office can do? And you might think, well, of course, they signed up to be and run for this office. Surely they know what they're. So you will find often that those running for those offices don't always know what they're running for. I have heard some interesting things out of candidates' mouths. School board members who are going to tell you that they're not going to raise your taxes, they don't have taxing authority. So that's not their job anyway. Now they make an ask, but they're not the ones that are actually raising your property taxes. That's our county commissioners, right? So knowing they need, I think one of the qualifications is, do they know the office they're running for? I once heard, it was on an ad about 4 years ago, a General Assembly candidate talking about how he was going to stop reassignment for students in his district. Again, that's something that's going to fall into something like a school board member, not a General Assembly make. This is, yeah. So I really encourage you to watch how they're speaking about the office that they're running for. What's their record of public service? Have they run before? Have they, what was their record before they ran for this office that you're looking for? Were they a volunteer? Did they work for a nonprofit? What nonprofit was that? And what was their vision and their mission while they worked at that nonprofit? Do they address education specifically? I would hope that when we have judges that they are doing that, right? That they are going to talk about how they believe in education or our children. So listen. And finally, community engagement. Are they out in our community? Where are they? What are they doing in our community? So this was starred. And the reason that it starred is because a lot of people claim to be part of PTA. Everybody loves to claim PTA, except when there's an actual PTA meeting to get to. And then you'll notice a lot of absentee people. But so just saying I'm a member of a PTA is good, but I would also want to know more, right? Were they a leader in that PTA? What did that PTA do while they were a leader? Because if all they did was fundraise, not my favorite thing. So look at how they're engaging in our community. And now is a really good time to keep eyes and ears out and how they're engaging in community right now, as we seem to have, more needs in our communities than ever, especially after the hurricane. So what are they doing? What are our candidates doing, and how are they helping? Okay, issue-based qualifications. All right. Big one for Pastors for North Carolina Children, a big one for Every Child and Save Our Schools. And anybody who is paying attention should be, are our candidates aware and understand inequalities? Do they see them? Do they talk about them? And how do they talk about them? Because if they think we're all doing fine and everybody's on an equal plane, well, we have a court case that says otherwise, and it's called Leandro. So it doesn't say Leandro, but I would say, what are their feelings about that court case? And, you can hear them in candidate forums and things. These are also things that we can ask them ourselves. Because if they're out in our community, and if we are out in our community, we might have a chance to do that. So, all right. Um, Other qualifications is when they talk, do they include specific ideas to solve the issues that they identify? One of the things you'll notice about candidates is it's really easy to pick apart our education system. It's really easy to find all of the problems, but if they're going to be an elected official, unlike me, who does get to just poke the bear every once in a while and not think of any solutions as a private citizen, it's going to be their job to solve these problems. And I hope that they have specific ideas to do so. So listen to specific ideas of what they're going to do about a problem. Um, the other thing, which we introduced at the very beginning, but we need to reiterate over and over again, our candidates should be very specific and express support for public schools, not just education. That's really easy to say, I love education, but do they support public schools? We used to live in a world where a lot of our elected officials or candidates would be very cagey, not say, want to say one way or the other. One of the sad things about the partisanship we're seeing now, but also some of the clear things, is that our candidates are saying the quiet part out loud now. So a lot of them aren't as hidden and using coded language as they used to anymore. So, when somebody says, I am for, say, a voucher program, then you know that that's not necessarily choosing to support public schools over just general education. So, but there are coded words. You're going to hear a lot about parent choice this year, like we did a couple of years ago. You're going to hear a lot. And those are words that we know what that means now because we've actually had bills that have been passed called things like the Parents' Bill of Rights. But what they're talking about is putting decisions outside into the hands of everyday parents, which sometimes is good, but it's not necessarily good, especially when it comes to things like literature and curriculum, who should be the primary manager of those things. And I hope that it's in public schools, our experts, our teachers, our librarians. So be wary of coded words. Again, understand the office that they're running for, and listen to their views of government. Do they believe that taxes are sometimes a good thing because they create revenue that can fund our schools? Because if you're completely anti-tax, for example, how are you going to get revenue to fund our schools and our teachers? How do you believe that government can be a public good, or do you believe that government is some evil entity? So hear the words about how they speak about government, whether it's in a positive or negative light. And I have number one pet peeve to watch out for, Suzanne. And that is when candidates say, we are spending more on education than we ever have before, or its close cousin, we've increased education spending by X amount. Okay. But is that adequate? Is that an adequate amount that you're spending more than you've ever had before? Or is that just inflation? Which right now we're not even keeping up with. We've increased by so much percentage. What does that mean, right? Are we adequately funding our schools? Is that money going to the places that it needs to go to help our most marginalized students? Those are the questions. That's just a statement about, I've spent money. Okay, we need way more context than that statement, but you'll hear that a lot. All right, green light candidate, green light, red light, and I also have yellow light. So the next slides are I'm going to show you basically some clips of websites that show that are actually from candidates. I've taken out the names, I've taken out a lot of stuff. But just to give you samples of what a candidate website might look like, generally you're going to click on a candidate and most of them are going to have an issue section. If they don't have an issue section, well, that's already a red light, but most of them will. Most of them will have some kind of, here are the issues that I stand for and why. And we're going to take a look at those and find out, and we're going to kind of grade them. Those are great candidates. They're doing everything we think they should say about public education. Some websites are really vague and they don't tell us anything really about the candidate or their beliefs. They're just really vague statements. And then there are some candidates where we read their website, we're like, whoa, no, thank you. So I'm going to take you through a couple of samples. All right, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but this is a great green light candidate from our state legislature. Um, they talk about being a public school advocate and a PTA leader. They talk about world-class education from pre-K through high school. They talk about that it should be well funded by the state. And then they talk about what steps they want to take. They want to increase teacher pay, restore pay scales that reward teachers for advanced degrees. They want to support all students through per pupil spending. They talk about social emotional learning through increased funding. They talk about level playing field. And, there might be, that there's unaccountable systems and programs going around, and that's not right. This is a great green light candidate. This is a no-brainer as far as, a voter is concerned when you look at, wow, this person is taking the issue of public education seriously. All right. All right. School board. Again, this is, you'll have to excuse some of the language because again, we had to cut out names, but they are talking about classified staff and raising pay for classified staff. They are talking about how they worked with the PTA, again, in elementary school. And they are talking about the Community Schools Initiative and how well that's been. And that model is something that they would like to implement more of. And they talk about recruiting staff and how they're going to do it, better working conditions, competitive pay, target more educators of color. And so this is another great school board candidate who understands the job and who is talking about the issue. Oh yeah. Yeah, we just had to cut out, anything specific so that you all couldn't just go figure out who we're talking about. All right. So this is what I was talking about, a yellow candidate who kind of talks about things, but very in very vague terms. So class size, competitive teacher pay, or curriculum decisions, it all comes down to listening and effectively addressing the concerns of parents, teachers, and school officials at the local level. I will spend more time in the classroom. So they're going to be doing a listening tour, but what are their actual solutions other than listening? It's not a red flag or anything, but it's also not a green light either. So I just need more information on this candidate. And luckily, I'm going to give you some tools to do that in a minute. All right. This is a board of commissioners who wants to bridge the gap and have opportunity for all. Again, they're stating a problem, really good. Good to know our problems. And they know that they want to bridge the gap. But again, how? What's your plan? How are you going to do that? I'd like to know as a voter. So again, good start. I just need a little more before I'm definitely going to vote for them. All right. All right. Okay. Red light candidate number 1. For school board, when elected, I will bring back parental access to classrooms for observation and volunteering. By the way, we have that already. A lot of people are still kind of in this idea that parents aren't allowed in schools or something. Yeah, we can volunteer there. You do have to go through a small questionnaire, but yes, this is somebody who is still stuck in the mask era. And really stuck on parental engagement. It's time to give schools back to the parents. Parents were never left out of our schools. So when you're hearing that, just remember, parents were never left out of school decisions, and parents have never been able, or schools have never been able to make medical decisions above parents. That's one I see a lot. if you're a parent in a public school, you know how hard it is just to get your kids some aspirin, uh, or Advil or whatever your kid's taking. There are a lot of restrictions, and it just tells me that this person isn't really involved in their school. This isn't a candidate who understands the public school system. Because this is not the kind of language I would be seeing for someone who does know what it's like to be a parent in a public school. All right. All right. So, Board of Commissioners, parents know what's best for our kids. Okay, cool. Sure, no problem. But they are also clearly stating a firm proponent of school choice. So, yeah, not my pro-education person. Not someone I would be voting for example, because that's my issue is public school. And I want somebody who is supporting public school as a county, as on the Board of Commissioners, as a county commissioner. Again, lots of parent choice language in these red light candidates. Now more than ever, we must give students and parents more flexibility in pursuing education. And again, this is all about choice. And so they are preferring choice as a state legislator rather than funding our public schools. And they're saying it fairly outright so that we can all see that this is somebody who is not probably going to be voting on an increase in public school funding. And that for me is a red light. So, all right. But that's just part of it. That's just their website. And if they don't have a website, big red light there. At this point, if you're running for something, you should have some way of communicating with your constituents or with voters on who you are and how you might vote on issues. But there's lots of different ways, lots and lots of different ways to find this. Now, you can always look through their social media. Some are very prolific social media people, and others are not. Some are very cautious on social media. Some have tried to wipe their social media before they ran for office, and they failed to do so properly. So if you're ever running to run for office, just know that there are people taking screenshots already. So you can look at their social media, their Facebook, their Twitter. Blue Sky is another one. Threads is another one that I didn't name here. TikTok is now taken off, so you can even watch them on TikTok where, sometimes they're just in front of a camera telling you everything they believe. Woohoo! That's great for a voter. I love to know exactly how they believe on things. So sometimes it can be extremely useful, especially if they're extremely candid. The next one I like a lot, which is endorsements. You can check out who's endorsed them. And usually that is posted on a social media account somewhere. Sometimes it will be in a newspaper or an online paper, like the Indy or something like that. And you can find out, who are they hanging out with? Again, using social media, you can see who did they take pictures with? Who did they go to a forum with and hug and, or introduce and say, I like this other candidate. Now, maybe they're not saying much about themselves, but it matters who your friends are in this business. So pay attention to who you're hanging around, who they're hanging around with. It can be extremely telling, especially for some of our candidates who may be not as forthcoming. But you can find out that they were, at somebody else's candidate event, and you can look at that's somebody else. So, but endorsements are really a great way of knowing who is for them and who is shouting their praises. All right, if they're a sitting legislator, you can go to our General Assembly page and find out their voting history. Did they vote for that budget you didn't like? Did they vote for that bill that you were opposed to? You can look up, especially if you know the bill. Sometimes it's hard if you don't know the bill, but you can even go to their specific page on their profile and look at bills they may have introduced. So you can look at their their voting history and what bills they decided to introduce. Um, Candidate forums. I love a good candidate forum. Um, a lot of times these will be recorded and put on YouTube. The League of Women Voters does lots of candidate forums. Our local PTAs definitely do a lot of great forums. There are tons out there, so go looking for them. I Sometimes they're very helpful, sometimes they're not helpful at all. It really does matter on the questions that our candidates get asked. But I've definitely found a lot of these to be extremely useful, especially if you're undecided. Uh, Now, if you're really into detecting things and you really want to get down and dirty into politics, you can always find out who's giving them money. And their financial, they have to disclose who gave to their campaign, especially individual funders. And you can go to the Board of Election site and go look up who gave them money. Um, it's kind of that next level of things, but it is out there and it is a tool that you can always use. Um, I put be wary of mailers on there because we have seen an increase of fake images, of AI images being used all over the place. And quite honestly, that can be also a warning for some social media at this point too. So we know that there was a candidate last year that they put some words on a T-shirt that candidate was not wearing, right? And so then they put that out in a mailer. So be wary of mailers because some of them can be misleading um, based on the technology available today. So I hope this was at least somewhat helpful. Again, um, these are just tips and tricks. I'm open for questions, obviously. Suzanne's going to get to some basic information about voting right now.
Yes, and I'm trying to get back to, can you all see me on the screen? Okay. Sorry. I had taken myself off, so I'm trying to figure this out. I wanted to give you a couple of updates on the voter dates that you need to know. This week, this Friday at 5 p.m. is the deadline to register to vote. So that is a huge, huge deadline. You need to be registered, submitted the form by 5 p.m. On the 17th, which is Thursday, a week from now, you're going to begin the in-person voting. At in-person voting, you can also do same-day registration for voting as well. But you would have to, if you aren't registered by the 11th, then you need to be sure to do it at an early voting site. The 29th is at 5 p.m. is the absentee ballot request deadline. If you want to vote by absentee ballot, it must be in by then. And be sure to vote and turn around and mail it right back because the deadline is the night of the election at 7:30 p.m. So you don't have long in there for it to get back in the mail. In-person voting ends on November 2nd at 3 p.m. So that is, that is when it finishes. You have to be in line by 3 p.m. that day for early voting. And then the 5th, the general election is Tuesday, November 5th. Polls in North Carolina open at 6:30 a.m. and they close at 7:30 p.m. So be sure you're in line to vote by 7:30. If you're in line, you should be allowed to vote. If you don't, then please file complaints. And if you are early voting and you want to help out that day, there are places where you can be poll chaplains or poll monitors. Democracy NC is a great organization that's organizing some of that to be able to be outside of polling places, just helping answer questions. I've done that the last couple of elections, and it's been a really powerful experience of just helping people find their polling place, making sure they're at the right place, answering the questions, nonpartisan, just basic how to vote type things. And like I said, the 5th at 7:30, that's a new rule change. It must be in by the 5th for the vote to be counted. We also put some links here, and at the end of the presentation, I'll be emailing out the link to the video and these slides so you can click on these links. But if you want to check your voter registration status in North Carolina, I recommend everybody does that. Even if you voted back in the spring, just go ahead and make sure and check again that you're registered this week. So you can check your status there. That's also where you can get your ballot. So when you check and see that you're registered, you'll be able to click on the link to download your ballot. This year, one of the things that's different is you must show ID in order to vote in North Carolina. And so you have to have acceptable ID, forms of ID. And so we have a list there. Driver's licenses that are valid are one of the big ones. But if you don't have a license, or you don't have one that's valid, or you don't have one of the other things, you can go to the Board of Elections and get an ID made for free that they will allow you to use to vote. If you mail in an absentee ballot, there's a tracker to be able to be sure that it's counted. And so there's a link there. And then we have the last two links here are for the Board of Elections, just their general website. And at the top, it says, I'm looking for, and you can like type in and search pretty easily to find what you're looking for. And then, as Susan mentioned, there's a campaign finances section. So that link at the bottom takes you to all the reports and things that are submitted, both for how they've earned the money, like where the money has come from, and then also how they've spent it during the election. It also has information on PACs and different things like that. So it's a great place to really do a deep dive if that's something that you're really interested in. So I want to open up now to questions. If you've got a question, if you want to raise your hand, you can go for it. If you want, to type it in the chat, that's also acceptable. But feel free to unmute if you have any questions or comments.
I have to say that there has been a growing, shift in our elected officials and our candidates to be more candid about where they land on public education specifically. Never before have I really heard a candidate, really espouse, I am for school choice and I am not going to fund our schools as an elected official. This is not something that all of them are, trying to hide anymore, which makes being a voter a little bit easier. But there are still those who may not say those words specifically. So that's why I created this. So yeah, but I would definitely find out who they're hanging around.
I just wanted to say I really appreciate the coded language comment around the parent choice, parents' rights, parent involvement piece. Is one I've been trying to explain to friends and family for a while. And I would just sort of add to that where a candidate tells you on their website where their own children go to school, to read that very carefully, because sometimes they will say things like, my children have attended public school, but what they mean is kindergarten in another state. And then they've, since then been homeschooled or something like that. Or, yeah, I'll try not.
No, I understand.
It's just, it's always fascinating to see sort of how they describe that. And there is a current school board candidate who identifies pretty clearly on his website where his children go to school. And I was really startled to one of the schools I'd never heard of. So I looked it up, and it was enlightening and told me a lot about that candidate.
Right.
So I think looking at that as well.
I agree. And I think it is telling. And that's something you can always ask a candidate. Where do your kids go to school if they have kids? Obviously, that doesn't work for all candidates because some of our
Right.
candidates are much, much older.
And also we all make decisions for our own children for a whole multitude of reasons. So I don't mean to
Correct.
suggest that someone whose
No.
kids aren't in their traditional local public school can't be a good candidate. But to your point, it does tell you something, and it gives you an opportunity to ask questions to better understand. And it, for me, particularly on a school board candidate, tells me what sort of decisions they think are important about public schools, or what they're not getting in a public school, that tells me something about them.
Yes, and I
Absolutely,
would also
Cindy.
say just it goes back to that knowledge of office. If you have no knowledge of our public school system, or have never volunteered there, worked there, or had your kids there, I think it's important to understand what it looks like inside of public school these days. And they can do that through some sort of community engagement too. But I need to, as a voter, I need to know that they have some knowledge of our public school system as it looks today.
I
Weta.
also just wanted, just wanted to add real quick before Weta. Cindy, I will say at one point I was trying to see about researching like where all the candidates and like the legislature's kids go to school. And I somewhat had my hand slapped a little bit because it is a privacy issue. And so I just want to kind of put that out there that we do need to respect the families of candidates and legislators, because there are privacy and safety concerns there, especially when you're dealing with children. But asking them and they volunteer that information, that's definitely important. But we can't really go searching for it sometimes very ethically. So,
Yeah,
live and
that
learn.
totally makes sense. And like you say, there are plenty of great reasons why a very
Right.
pro public schools candidate might choose to send their own child to a private school or a charter school or homeschool, because not all kids are the same. And,
Right.
so
And
I do want to definitely acknowledge that. But even not all private schools or charter schools are the same. So
yeah, very, very true. Weta, question.
One of the questions that I would ask is school safety, because that's one of the areas that there seems to be a lot of misinformation, and to think that if you put an SRO in an office in a school, that's going to make schools safer, and if we put up these metal detectors, that's going to do that. But if we take out the bad kids, then that's going to do it, rather than looking at what are the issues that that are not addressed. And I know in going to school board meetings, there's a lot of kids whose needs are not being met because they're special needs, and they may get categorized in that area. And so those simplistic kind of, let's just lock up the school and make them safe, and it's a real concern for me.
I will say that school safety is really touchy in the sense of, how, people are very, very passionate about it. But I can say that you will also find answers that won't lie specifically on a conservative or a liberal side. We've seen a lot of bipartisanship, and also like just different views of an individual that may cross over from one party to another. So school safety is an interesting subject, and we'll tell you something about that candidate. But yeah, it is something that does not necessarily go straight forward on what I would call a party ticket. So yeah,
it's not simple. It's not a simple matter.
No.
If they have simple solutions, that tells you they don't really understand the issues.
Right. Right. And I was going to say, a lot of times we'll hear more SROs. Well, there are situations where that might be helpful, but we also know from the research that putting more SROs in schools increases the school to prison and school to deportation pipelines. And so we have to be very careful. Like Susan was saying, it isn't straight party. None of these issues are straight party in most situations, but especially with school safety, the simplistic answers tend to be the ones that they're problematic for me. There is a lot of nuance there, for sure.
I think that's one of the issues for me is that sounds like an okay thing. Well, don't we all want schools to be safe? Well, we do, but we want all children to be safe. We want all
Right.
children to be treated. It's not about how, someone. I mean, again, it's one of those talking things that doesn't address the issues. It's just
Right.
and a lot of people who, like I said, who don't have very much depth in it, don't understand that if they're, oh yeah, we want our schools to be safe, it might be
Right.
a selling point. And I want to follow up with what you said. I'm part of a group that looks at the research on school SROs. There is no research that shows that they have a positive impact. There is no research to back that up.
Right.
So.
Right. And,
And
I've heard principals before say that they were thankful that they had them on campus for certain situations and stuff. So, I mean, it is like, there is a lot of nuance there. And yeah, go ahead, Susan.
for all of those of you who are in the know in public education, who have either kids or are involved as teachers or who have worked in a school, who have volunteered in a school, it's kind of on us, and I hate to put anything on your shoulders, but to talk to others about what our schools look like these days, because a lot of things that you're going to hear from a candidate might sound good, right? I mean, it might sound good to make sure that we have parents volunteering in our schools, but the fact that we already do, or it might sound good to say that, they have to sign a code of conduct. Well, you can tell them they already do that, right? You are there, and I am here to make sure that your friends and neighbors know what's important to public schools today.
Mm-hmm.
As someone in the know who is actively involved in your child's education. So the most powerful tool we have is our own voices and our own willingness to talk about the uncomfortable subject that is politics. But our ballot is an amazing tool to transform our schools, to transform our state into a positive place for all children. So I'm going to, just ask you to use your voice and tell others. You don't have to tell them who you're voting for. I do. If you want my sample ballot, I'll fill one out for you and send it to you. I don't mind. But most people are not willing to do that. You just talk about that issue. Talk about why you believe public schools are a public good and maybe what you are looking for in a candidate. What for you as a voter is important as a candidate for school board, for state legislature, for Supreme Court judge. That's what I hope that we all take away is a civic obligation to use our voice for the betterment of our state. So go forth and talk politics. Or at least public schools.
I just put a link in the chat for the Every Child North Carolina voter information and the advocacy toolkit. In the advocacy toolkit, if you scroll down a little bit, there is a page about how funding works. So you can look at that, and also how each of the positions or almost every position on your ballot affects public education in different ways. And so that link is really helpful from the governor all the way down to local school boards, including judges, all those things that people need to be paying attention to. So I put that in there. I want to go through a couple of last, not introductory slides, but things that we want you to be paying attention to. Susan has developed, along with Renee Seckel, they are the ones who founded Save Our Schools North Carolina, and they have put together an amazing podcast, very local to North Carolina, education specific. It's a great way to just get little bits and pieces to understand more about what's happening. And so here's the link to their podcast. You can also find it on any of your podcast ways that you access podcasts, but Advocacy Bites is really wonderful. This is some information for us. This is my information for contact if you would like to reach out, have questions, follow up with this. And also our Every Child North Carolina, which is our equitable funding coalition. Here's information. The monthly partner meetings are coming up, so you can join us for that to hear more about it. And then this is just some information if you're not familiar with Pastors for North Carolina Children. We are a nonpartisan nonprofit ministry, and we work statewide to raise the awareness for faith communities to support public schools. And to work for systems change, not just the charity. Many churches are doing great charity, but we want to work towards systems change, the justice work as well. This is more information about the different organizations. And then I wanted to just offer a benediction to close our time together. But I wanted to see before we do that, are there any last minute questions or anything that you all have?
I can say that, yes, this is recorded and you can share with your friends. I've done this presentation for PTAs. I've done like a 10-minute chunk of this. I've scaled it down. I can make it longer. Please don't make me. But I am more than happy to speak about this to other organizations, to whoever, wherever you invite me. I will be there virtually or in person, depending on where you ask me to go. A little note about the Advocacy Bites podcast. This is partisan. This is my own personal belief system over here. I do name names, just a warning. It falls out of the nonpartisan world. So just a fair warning. If you want my real views on things, hit the podcast.
Absolutely. And I will say, one last thing that came to mind is a lot of times, especially with some of the culture war issues, we see candidates talking about, we don't like SEL, social emotional learning. That's one of the big buzzwords right now. And then in the same breath, the candidate is saying that they want children to be able to learn to be cooperative and collaborate and not have bullying and not have some of these problems in schools. And we have to remember that those are part of social emotional learning, that is what SEL is. And so just being aware of some of those buzzwords like SEL today is one of the big ones, what that really means, and noticing where candidates clearly don't know what they're talking about, and really taking that into account. So just my one last little note. But I offer this benediction for us as we journey toward November 5th and the election. So a blessing for us, may God bless us with discomfort and easy answers, half truths, and superficial relationships, so that we will live deeper in our hearts. May God bless us with anger at injustice, oppression, abuse, and exploitation of people in the earth, so that we will work for justice, equity, freedom, and peace. May God bless us with tears to shed for those who suffer from pain, rejection, hunger, war, and natural disasters, so that we will reach out our hands to comfort them and turn their pain to joy. And may God bless us with enough foolishness to think that we can make a difference in the world, so that we will do the things which others say cannot be done, to bring justice and kindness to all of our children and the poor. Amen. Thank you all so much for joining us today. It's a real pleasure to be able to offer this, and we look forward to seeing you on another webinar again soon.
Thanks to you both.
How do I stop the recording?
Can you stop recording? Yay. Okay.